What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. We're going to talk some Knicks-Pistons, though. This game followed a very similar pattern to the rest of the series. The Knicks came out in a must-win closeout game and immediately took control. They were really getting out in transition. They were hitting those driving gaps and getting to the rim quickly early in the clock. The Pistons weathered that with several big runs, one in the first half, riding an absurdly hot streak, shooting the basketball from Malik Beasley, who put it all together with a crazy left shoulder running movement three while he's falling out of bounds right before half. And then another one in the fourth quarter where the Knicks had taken control and taken a double-figure lead, but Ausar Thompson came into the game and played some really, really quality individual defense on Jalen Brunson, took him out of rhythm for a little while. And the Pistons ended up working their way into a 7-point lead. But down the stretch, despite the Pistons holding a 7-point lead, the Knicks were able to slowly and methodically work their way back into the game. JB Bickerstaff did them a favor by taking Ausar out of the game for a little bit. It's so funny. I've been watching Pistons fans have a meltdown about the lineup decisions from JB Bickerstaff because they've just been so much better in this series with Ausar Thompson on the floor. And like for all the shots that Malik Beasley's made, they've gotten killed in his minutes for the most part over the course of this series. And it's because, pretty simply, Ausar Thompson makes life a hell of a lot more difficult for Jalen Brunson than anybody else in a Pistons jersey can. But Brunson was able to attack in that stretch when Ausar was off the floor, and he was able to tie the game. And then we ended up with a really interesting final sequence. Ausar Thompson gets a stop on Jalen Brunson on an island. Slides his feet extremely well, prevents any sort of like turning the corner from Brunson, takes contact in the chest, and then every time you fade over one of your shoulders, in this case, Jalen Brunson kind of turning over his left shoulder, the ball comes up in the shooting pocket right in front briefly as he's turning over his left shoulder, right? So the ball is exposed temporarily there for a minute. And as I always talk about, a lot of these pull-up shooters, they don't see you up top. They don't see the contest. But if you can disrupt their rhythm down low, and Ausar Thompson waited for Brunson to turn and expose the ball, and he stripped down and took the ball away. The Knicks were having a hell of a time trying to get Ausar switched off of Brunson in these sequences. So Brunson had no choice. Because Ausar was fighting through all those screens, Brunson had no choice but to figure out how to get a bucket against the other team's best defender. And one of the things that I thought was genius about Brunson's game winner was the way he identified his individual advantage in this matchup. The individual advantage that Jalen Brunson has in this matchup against Ausar Thompson is he has a lower center of gravity, and he's pretty fucking strong for how big he is. So what does he do? He makes a hard left-handed dribble move, an extended, hard left-handed dribble move, gets into Ausar Thompson's body, snatchback dribble. And in that situation, because he's got contact with Ausar's body and because he has the lower center of gravity, it's a very similar dynamic to what I've been talking about so much about dislodging your base. He was able to, with that hard move and that snatchback dribble, dislodge Ausar Thompson's base about as dramatically as you'll ever see in a perimeter matchup. There's an angle from the scorer's table or from, I don't know, the media table, whatever it is that's on that side of the floor to the left of where the game winner was. And it's kind of like a portrait style, like smartphone video. And on the snatchback dribble, Ausar Thompson just completely exits the frame. And Jalen's able to just steadily settle into that off the dribble jump shot right there at the top of the key. But I just thought it was, I talk a lot about how the playoffs are about solving puzzles. And specifically for Brunson, because of the way that they look to attack, it's very ISO heavy. It's very matchup attacking. One of the things Brunson had to do was figure out how to get a bucket on Ausar Thompson in a big spot when Ausar had been giving him some issues in that middle of the fourth quarter. Ausar Thompson was the reason Brunson got out of rhythm and started missing clean looks as the Pistons took a 7-point lead. Ausar Thompson got a stop on the previous possession. Brunson had the challenge in front of him, he had the puzzle in front of him, and he figured it out. If I lose my momentum, and I operate around the elbows with a bunch of hesitation dribbles like he did on the previous possession, I'm not going to be able to shake this guy. And then I'm going to have to turn around over him. I'm going to expose the ball down low. He's probably going to get a good contest up high. But if I get my momentum going, if I get ahead of steam and I get connected to his body, I can snatch back and I can shed him and I can get the separation that I need. Unbelievable move from Jalen Brunson to win the series. I talked before the series about how these teams were pretty evenly matched, but that there was an experience and execution advantage that would push the Knicks over the top. I thought it was evident at the start of the series with the way Brunson was attacking Tobias Harris and finding a matchup that he liked while Cade was like having these 0 pass possessions attacking OG Anunoby. But it got even more complicated down the stretch as once again you saw the Knicks found a coverage that worked against Cade. We're going to talk about it in a minute. And the Pistons found a way to avoid switches. And so Brunson's challenge was figuring out how to score against Asar. Cade Cunningham was being faced with a very simple problem. He was attacking Jalen Brunson in guard screens, and Brunson was hedging and recovering. But because Cade had a rough night shooting the three-point shot, he bailed on it. And that was his biggest mistake, and we're going to talk about Cade a little bit in the big picture here in a minute. But Cade refused to take the pull-up three that was open in the gaps in that hedge that Jalen Brunson was throwing. And as a result, he didn't have a comfortable shot or a comfortable look that he could go to. And there just was no consistency for the Pistons in crunch time in the series, while Brunson knew exactly how he wanted to attack, and he was just so surgical in making sure that he maximized those crunch time possessions. No disrespect to Cade. This was his first time doing it. We've said this a million times in the series. Jalen Brunson has played in, this is his 9th playoff series since he left the Dallas Mavericks. He's got a ton of experience in these situations. Cade is learning, but that experience gap ultimately ended up being the difference between these two teams. I want to talk a little bit about the Boston series, and then we'll talk a little bit about Cade, because I do want to talk about his development moving forward. So looking ahead to the Boston series, I rewatched their last matchup earlier today, the matchup where the Knicks actually kind of like controlled a good portion of the game and ended up losing in overtime. You can see what the Knicks' best options are on both ends of the floor. The Knicks approached that game with a very high level of intensity because they so desperately needed a signature win in a season that was just utterly devoid of signature wins. And you found some things. Jalen Brunson was able to get some advantages attacking Kristaps Porzingis in action. He definitely likes his ISO matchups against Derek White more than Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday does a really good job on him, but Derek White even, it's not a great option there. Derek White just gets such great contests on pull-up jump shots. But he can get good stuff against Porzingis, and I think he can get some good stuff against Horford. Although Horford wasn't on the floor down the stretch in this particular game. On the other end of the floor, though, it's a steady diet of the Celtics looking to attack Cat and Jalen Brunson in action. Now, one of the things that I noticed, instead of just running their hedge and recover scheme, one of the things that they were doing down the stretch that allowed them to have some success is what's called peel switching. It's a very different kind of switching than normal switching. So in normal switching, guy comes up to set a screen, you just pass him off, right? The other guy closes out. He takes the matchup. The guy who's guarding the ball sinks underneath the screener to prevent him from getting a slip into the back line, and then you just play contain the ball basketball. One of the things they were doing against Boston down the stretch in that overtime game was peel-off switching. What that means is the guy's guarding the ball actually chases the man over the top. By chasing the man over the top into the switch, it causes him to at least have to attack right away or rush his decision-making a little bit. Then what they were doing is after he'd chase over the top, then he would quit on that specific chase and bail out and close out to, Kristaps Porzingis popping in action or Derek White popping in action. And so it does ultimately end in a switch. And in those situations, it's going to come down to Cat holding up against a Derek White like he had to down the stretch in that game, or Jalen Brunson having to hold up against one of the Jays. The Celtics also found a way to attack that by dragging out the screening action. Tatum had a really good one where he generated a clean look for Derek White at the top of the key, where he just attacked downhill fast so that as, I believe it was OG Anunoby, tried to peel off, he was so far away that it was too long of a closeout. They ended up having to close out from the weak side. And so there are still openings that the Celtics can find there, but ultimately the Knicks' best opportunity to keep themselves out of rotation is to switch. regardless of whether it's a peel switch or more of a traditional switch. But that's going to be the thing that I noticed on film that's going to end up playing a big role in this series is, can Jalen Brunson do a better job of attacking Porzingis and Horford in screening action than the Jays on the other end of the floor, or Derek White as well if he's involved, can attack Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson in screening action? That's going to be the series. The margin for error for New York is just so incredibly thin. Every Knick is going to have to play to the absolute peak of their ability. I'm going to hold off on making a pick until tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, we will have a series preview on Celtics Knicks that will be on the channel probably, right around noon-ish Pacific time. So keep an eye on the feeds around there. But this is going to be an interesting series, but the Knicks are going to have their work cut out for them. Boston's got some clear advantages, a clear way to attack. I was talking with Colin Cowherd about this on his show yesterday. But one of the things that's interesting about the personality of these two teams is there's this idea we went and we got OG and we got McHale. That's our answer to the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum problem. We need lots of big, versatile wings. But I think people are missing the point about what has made the Celtics successful over the years. It's not because they have big, versatile wings. It's because they can put together 5-man lineups where everybody can guard multiple positions. That's what gives them the flexibility to switch. That's what makes it so that you can't very easily break down their defense at the point of attack. There's an example in the Celtics film that I was watching today where it's it doesn't matter if OG Anunoby's guarding Jason Tatum if you can screen with Jalen Brunson's man and Jalen Brunson's not going to switch on to him. Because then OG gets caught on the screen and Tatum can get downhill or Tatum can attack a defense that's in rotation. It doesn't matter that Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges are super versatile forwards if they're anchored by two players that you can get their defense into rotation and screening action. That is going to be the key for the Knicks in this series, is trying to find a way to find a defensive coverage with those two that can keep them out of rotation. But again, keep an eye on the feeds tomorrow. We'll have a series preview in the middle of the day. Lastly, on Cade, before we get into our mailbag, I get it. If your jump shot's not falling, you want to try to find something else that works. But one of the things that's going to be very important for Cade in his development is, have you ever watched a Jalen Brunson game where you feel like he won't take a jump shot when his team needs him to down the stretch, even if he's missing? We'll see games this year where Brunson is, 5 for 19, but he'll take and make 3 big jump shots down the stretch. You have to trust your work and trust your ability to knock down that shot. The reason why it matters is because of the coverage. The shot that the Knicks were conceding to Cade tonight was that interchange gap in the hedge and recover. So as you see Cade Cunningham coming off the screen and OG Anunoby's guarding him, when Tim Hardaway Jr. comes up and sets the pick, Brunson is jumping out to hedge, getting in Cade's way so that he has to go around the hedge. OG in that sequence is going underneath to meet Cade on the other side of the screen. So as Brunson is bailing on the hedge and as OG is coming back up to meet on the other side, there was a clear gap where Cade was looking at the rim in a high hesitation dribble and wouldn't take the shot. And ultimately, the reason why they lost this game down the stretch is they didn't score a single time. They didn't make a bucket after they took that 7-point lead. One bucket, you're sending this to game 7. And so with Cade, you need to come down to a series of very basic moves that you can go to in isolation situations and basic coverage beating shots that you cannot bail on. That pull-up 3 absolutely has to be a shot that you trust when you need to take it, because you might have to take it because of a coverage in a specific situation late in the game. We know with Jalen Brunson, he likes to fade over his left shoulder. He likes to step back to his right, kind of shooting over his left shoulder. And then he likes to set himself up like he's going to go off of a screen with his right hand and then hard right to left crossover to try to get downhill to reject a screen. Those are like the three main go-to kind of things you're going to see from Brunson down the stretch. He's gotten incredibly good at those moves. If he gets to those moves, he's going to hit them about 50% of the time on his jump shots, and he's going to get to the foul line or get something decent at the rim at a pretty high rate on his drives. He has these dependable, rock-solid, we're stuck in the half court, it's tied, there's 5 minutes left types of moves. That's the type of reliability that Cade needs to build out in specific parts of his shot making late in games. He took and made like a little left shoulder fade over OG Anunoby in the post. That was the only jump shot that he was willing to take in that stretch. Okay, let's say that that's one of your moves. You need to rep it out so that you have this left shoulder fade that at any given moment, if your team needs a bucket, oh shit, let's pretend you're dealing with an Asar Thompson lookalike on the other team. I can't get Asar Thompson off me. What am I going to do? I got to find a way to score on this guy. And there's just a little bit of a passivity that we saw from Cade, from a little bit of a lack of trust in what he could do in those situations down the stretch. I thought it reflected throughout the series. There was no real consistency in the way that Cade looked to attack down the stretch. And so, again, I'm not being critical of Cade. I'm just talking about his long-term development. This is the piece that's missing for him, that when he adds, he can take this team to another level. As you can see, this Pistons team is closer to being able to make a deeper playoff run than we originally thought. And Cade's development is going to be the thing that pushes them over the top in that regard.